Jewish resistance. The Wannsee Conference had made the death of every Jew a priority in Nazi-occupied Europe. Any Jew who succeeded in living was defying Hitler's policy. The Jew who did not wear his yellow badge, did not register with the Judenrat, and mixed in with the general public was resisting. In Eastern Europe, some Jewish families sneaked out of the shtetl or ghetto and escaped to the woods. Small groups of these refugees lived a lonely and dangerous life, ever fearful of being spotted. These groups often included mothers with young children and elderly men. They could not stay anywhere too long, and during the day they could not build a fire because an informer or airplane flying overhead might spot them. The vast majority of Jews lived by Nazis' rules, hoping that the Germans would realize they were useful labor for the war. In Eastern Europe, millions had been forced to leave their homes and move to the ghettos. There, they endured misery beyond imagination. They either believed they were being relocated when they boarded the cattle car that took them to the death camp, or they were too exhausted and no longer cared. Others were unwilling to give in quietly. If they were going to die, some German was going with them. A Lithuanian Jew, Abba Kovner, warned other young people not to be tricked by the Nazis. People of the ghetto were not being sent on labor details or even to concentration camps. They were going to the slaughter. Brothers, it is better to die fighting like free men than to live at the mercy of the murderers. Those resisting included those joining partisan units and participating in concentration camp and ghetto uprisings. Partisans joined armed groups resisting the German occupation. Some units were all Jewish, some all Gentile, and some were mixed. Gentile bands could be as anti-Semitic as the Germans, so the Jew had to be careful when approaching any band. Partisans operated in small units and raided German camps, supply lines, and communications. In Yugoslavia, 2,000 Jews joined Tito's army, which fought the Germans and their cruel Yugoslav allies, the Ustashi. In Italy, from 2,000 to 3,000 Jews joined the resistance. In France, they helped other Jews escape and were active in the French resistance. Concentration camp uprisings. Who was weaker than a beaten and starved prisoner known only by the number on his tattoo? The Nazis had killed many potential leaders, and they had spies among the inmates who were willing to turn in their own mothers for a potato. Despite the odds, uprisings were planned and carried out at a few camps. In 1943, at Treblinka, prisoners began collecting anything that might be useful in fighting. They got a break when an armory door was brought to the workshop for repair. The inmates made a mold of the lock and made a key. About 60 men were involved in a plot to kill some guards and escape into the woods. Armed with hand grenades, pistols, rifles, shovels, and pickaxes, they attacked in August. After setting fire to the crematoria and fake railroad station, they headed for the forest. At first, they were never captured, but those who were caught were killed. At Sobibor, a daring escape was led by a Russian Jew in October 1943. By nightfall, over half the inmates escaped into the forest a few yards away. About one-third were captured, and others froze in the cold Polish winter. Only a few are known to have survived. 2 days after the uprising, Himmler ordered that the camp be destroyed. At Birkenau, a group of Sonderkommandos persuaded women inmates working at the munitions factory to smuggle explosives to them. In October 1944, their revolt began. Some SS and Kappels were killed, and the inmates broke through the fence. A massive manhunt found all the men, and they were tortured and killed. The 4 women were hanged. Ghetto uprisings were difficult to carry out because many in the ghetto feared the Nazis so much that they did not want anyone to do anything that might make conditions worse. But the time came when it was clear the Nazis were going to kill every Jew in the ghetto, and then many were willing to go down fighting. In many ghettos in Eastern Europe, groups secretly organized to fight. The uprising in Warsaw is the most famous. The Warsaw Ghetto had been shrinking in population since the death camp at Auschwitz had gone into operation. Jews from Lublin had told how the Nazis had destroyed the ghetto there, but the Warsaw Judenrat did not believe them. When the Nazis demanded that the Judenrat supply 8,000 people each day for quote-unquote relocation, many realized the ghetto was doomed. By July 1943, the once overcrowded ghetto was down to 65,000 people. For the ZOB, the Jewish Fighting Organization in Warsaw, the time to resist was now or never. The ZOB made contact with the Polish underground. The Poles sold them a few guns they had, but far from enough to win a battle with the Waffen-SS. The Poles also sent reports of German troop movements to them. In April 1943, the Poles warned the ZOB the German attack would be soon. On April 19th, troops marched into the ghetto, but they were beaten back by the Jewish defenders, something they had never dreamed possible. The ZOB had few illusions that they were actually going to win, but they fought to kill as many Nazi soldiers as possible and to prove Jews were not cowards. The Nazis shelled and burned buildings, flooded sewers, and cut off gas, electricity, and water. The revolt's leader, Mordecai Analytz, was killed May 8th, and by May 15th, only occasional gunfire was heard. SS General Jürgen Stroop reported that his men had killed 13,000 to 14,000. After the uprising, the ghetto's Jews were sent to the death camps. One of those sent was Dr. Janis Korczak, a popular radio personality. He had refused to escape in 1939 because the children of his orphanage needed him. When their time came to leave for Auschwitz, he dressed the children in their best clothes and walked beside them to their deaths.